After George airs his feelings about mixed marriages, he has to engage in full-on farce to save a business deal. Years later, a near-death experience leads him to open a museum about himself. Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Battle of the Network shows. I'm Rick, here with Mike.
Hey.
And today we're going to look at one of the longer-running sitcoms of all time, a series that, I don't know, I guess we can get into this, but it seems like maybe it doesn't get as much due as one would think for a show that lasted 11 seasons, but it spawned a lot of talent, and it's memorable in its own way, I think, and that show is The Jeffersons.
We're moving on up.
I think we are. We finally made the big time, and I feel pretty good about it. Might even do a few dance steps here.
Yeah.
I might.
I might have a piece of the pie.
Yeah? Oh.
Yeah.
Finally, huh?
Yeah, finally.
Well, The Jeffersons is something I did watch quite a bit as a kid. I remember watching it sometimes when it was on in prime time, but more in reruns, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, a show that long is going to have, like, multiple windows. Like, it'll be in syndication while it's still on the air, and I think that's kind of what the deal is with me.
I think that's definitely the first place I watched it, but I do remember maybe in the later seasons watching some of it, like when it was on Sunday nights.
Mm-hmm.
But also my memories tend to be of the earlier seasons, which would have been the reruns.
Yeah, and I think it was on for a while on weekdays on CBS. They put it in daytime reruns. Over the years, it's been picked up by TV Land, TV One, Nick at Night, so it never really goes away.
No.
But, I mean, 11 seasons, that's a long time.
And did you see that for sitcoms with primarily African-American casts, it's second only to Tyler Perry's House of Pain by one episode?
Yeah.
Which seems intentional.
Yeah, it does. I was wondering about that.
But I think Sherman Hemsley and Isabella Sanford were on that episode, or one of the episodes.
Right.
To commemorate
yeah.
that. I don't know.
Well, The Jeffersons, of course, was a spinoff of All in the Family, and it started in the 1970s, and I always think of it as a 1970s show. Mm-hmm. But to show you how long the show was on, by the time, in its last season, it was preceded by Murder, She Wrote. So that just seems kind of weird to me, because I was looking at, like, some of these TV grids, and, like, in that 1984 or whatever, I was just picturing, like, 60 Minutes, Murder, She Wrote, and The Jeffersons, and I was just picturing Pat Summerall talking about what was going to be on, next 60 Minutes, followed by Murder, She Wrote, and then The Jeffersons, and I just didn't quite remember that, but it seems like, because Murder, She Wrote seems like a classic, like, late 80s, early 90s kind of deal, but that was on for a long time, too, I guess.
Yeah.
So it just seems odd to me that those shows overlapped.
It does, but that definitely puts I was watching those things, and watching 60 Minutes with my dad, and then watching Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah.
Watching The Jeffersons, I don't know what else was paired with it by then, but...
Well, The Jeffersons was moved around a little bit, but it was on Sunday night for quite a while, and I would call it another solid ratings performer.
Yeah, up and down, like it started out hot,
a little bit,
and then went down.
I think it started hot, and it seemed like it was a big show, and then for a while it just was really popular again, and then the last season it fell like out of the top 20 way down. But for a while it was a pretty consistent show, and it had 3 or 4 years where it was in the top 10. Really high. It seems to me like because I'm interested in kind of trying to figure this out. It seems to me like at its peak was when maybe it was on Sunday nights, and I think when 60 Minutes got really, really popular and became like the number one show on TV, Jefferson's probably benefited from being part of that Sunday night lineup. Not saying that it was only popular because of that, but maybe that took it from being like a top 20 show to like a top 10 show, being part of that Sunday night let off by 60 Minutes, which it's easy to forget that for a while 60 Minutes was the most popular show on television.
Right.
But so it was a long-running show for CBS and was on longer than many, many other sitcoms that we've talked about. And again, 11 seasons, man.
Yeah.
And the show kind of underwent a few changes, but it stayed pretty much the same show for its whole run.
Yeah, only watched one really late season episode. But I guess even in one of the ones we're going to talk about is later, George did seem to mellow a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that, and in a way, that can be frustrating, but in a way, I'm sure that is the same with Archie Bunker, is the basic premise of the show is that they're behaving in a way that's not appropriate,
Right.
let's say. And the show is trying to prove that, and so at some point they need to grow.
Yeah.
Because if they don't grow, then it's kind of saying that bigots will always be bigots.
Yeah.
On the other hand, certainly in the case of George, it maybe robs him a little bit of his humor.
Yeah. I think creatively, in those later seasons, the show wasn't what it was. And I would prefer to watch the earlier seasons. Mm-hmm. And I think whether it's coincidental or not, the more racially charged aspects of the show were more prominent in the early seasons. And yeah, he was more mellow. And near the end, it was more like, oh, okay, George is like stuck up and he's kind of buffoon sometimes. But they kind of de-emphasize the fact that like, and let's, we should mention like really the show was built around the fact that George was a bigot.
Yeah.
And one thing that really bothered him was interracial marriage.
Yes.
Which is like a big part of the show. They had an interracial couple, the Willises. And by the end of the series, it was more like, okay, George is a jerk.
Right.
And he's tough to get along with, but not so much because he's always, making epithets, hurling epithets at Willis.
It's just his arrogance and his kind of being a blowhard.
And and kind of clueless about some things and self-centered.
Yeah, but he and Willis are kind of more like a comedy odd couple.
Yeah.
And Bentley, I guess, too, a little bit.
Yes.
At least I noticed in the credits. I'd forgotten, but the credits of like a season 11 one, Bentley like giving George a boost into a dumpster or something.
Yeah,
and I'm like, they got into hijinks together, didn't they?
Right. And there's actually like one episode I was looking at. I just saw the description, but it's like it involves. This is classic. It involves Willis, Bentley, and George going on a camping trip to like prove their masculinity to the women or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, yep. And that was a later season episode. It's like, yep. But I think it's the show is always watchable to me because of Sherman Hemsley as George Jefferson.
Yeah.
I think George Jefferson is one of the great TV characters of all time.
Yeah, I can get on board with that.
I mean, he's very entertaining. Like, even when he says things that, like a lot of his insults and put-downs, even if you take like the racial aspect out of it, if he just says things, they're not all that funny, but the way he says it, and he enjoys himself so much that like he'll do like a little snicker after he says it, and kind of like move. It's entertaining to watch. It makes it funny.
Yeah, because a lot of them are just like, you're ugly.
Yeah.
Or you're fat.
Right. Yeah.
Or you're white.
And then he's just kind of like slapping his knee and like laughing. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
But he's like moving his head around and doing all kinds of things. I mean, this is his classic character.
Yeah. And he's in that school of not just Archie Bunker, but like Ralph Cramden and Fred Flintstone and these kind of self-centered blowhards who get taken down a peg a lot.
Yes.
And then just climb back up and
right.
go through it all again.
Yeah.
But yeah, he plays it with such energy and charisma, really.
Yeah.
Just the way when he barrels into a room and takes over. And I think this is an odd thing, but those later seasons, Sherman Hemsley, he's older, of course, he filled out a little bit, and he doesn't seem to have that. He's a little bit bigger, and so he has less presence in a way. Like when George is, because he's short, he's always short, but he's also small and like, thin, and I didn't remember him having been a boxer, but that's definitely part of his energy and all of that. There's something that's just more lively. Yeah,
he was like wiry, but just kind of like like uncoiled. Here comes George, just like that powder keg kind of thing. But definitely more prevalent in the earlier seasons.
Yeah.
Now we decided to look at two different episodes. It's a little simplistic to say earlier and later, but I guess that's kind of the third season, the eighth season.
Yeah. Right.
And I think some of the things we're talking about are apparent in these episodes. Definitely.
Although the 8th season one is pretty funny.
Okay. I think I might not have liked it as much as you did.
I just thought it was ridiculous.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Well, I guess maybe we should mention the episodes. We picked from season 3 an episode called A Case of Black and White. And from season 8, it's called The House That George Built. Now, Case of Black and White premiered January 31st, 1977. Okay, and The House That George Built was November 29th, 1981. So really, season 3 to season 8, when you're talking about it, that seems kind of far apart. But really, it's 4 years. That doesn't seem like that far apart.
Yeah.
But now watching them, though, they definitely seem like kind of, you can tell it's like a show that's been on a while.
Yeah.
I mean, the characters, like you said, they age a little bit and everything. And I think in the earlier seasons, it's kind of more tied into to the All in the Family kind of universe and everything.
Right.
But by the end of the show, by season 8, or later seasons, I mean, it's easy to forget that they even came from that same universe. Just the show looks a little different and everything like that.
Can we talk about the All in the Family part of it?
Yes, please.
A little bit.
Let's do.
For some reason, I thought just that George had been played by someone else on All in the Family. But it turns out that guy was playing his brother.
Yeah, but I think they weren't clear about that at first. Though.
Okay. And Norman Lear was waiting for Sherman Hemsley to, like, he wrote this role he had this role in mind, supposedly, and so he's mentioned a lot, but he won't step foot in the Bunker's house, so.
Yeah.
So you don't see him, and then he finally shows up. And then, of course, there's the issue of the two Lionels.
Yeah.
Mike Evans, who we've talked about in Good Times. Mm-hmm. And then he left for the Jeffersons. I didn't realize. I was surprised, just because, of course, I encountered this as a kid in reruns, so I didn't know the order of them. That the second Lionel was there in, seasons 2 through 4 or something?
Yeah.
They're really early.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Mike Evans came back at some point and then left again.
Yeah.
It's just strange, and I feel bad for the second Lionel, but I don't like him as much.
Yeah, sort of while Good Times was on the air was when, you know, Mike Evans, and then he came back after Good Times was more or less gone. But
yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Henry Jefferson, I guess, was Louise's brother, right?
He's George's.
Or George's brother, I'm sorry, right. But, like, the early episodes, it looks to me like, I think there's at least one episode where it's implied, if not outright said, that Henry is her husband.
Okay.
So there was some shady stuff going on there. Yeah. It's not just you. It was weird the way they did that, but...
Just more fodder for our Crisis on Infinite Norman Lear universes.
Yes. and again, I don't think this is really a show that rolls off the tongue when you think about Norman Lear shows. Mm-mm. I think you think more of All in the Family, even One Day at a Time more now, and Maude, because they generate the headlines. Jeffersons, although covering in some of the same subject matter, was more like, to me, it's more like a pure sitcom in some ways, and I also kind of thought that Norman Lear didn't have as much involvement with it, but clearly from the beginning he did. I don't know how much day-to-day he had once the show got going, but you could say that about a lot of his shows.
And even there, I'm wondering, and I didn't see this information out there, but like he gets a developed by credit, and in the end credits there's a created by, and there are 3 names. So I wonder if it's a little bit like Good Times, where they took an idea and then turned it into a different idea.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Like there was already an idea about, it might not even have been an African American family, but a family moving up economically, and then that fit what he wanted to do with the Jeffersons.
Right.
You know, they put it together or something. But,
yeah, there you go. And there's a lot of sitcom veterans that worked on this, and you know, went on to go on a lot of the shows that we've talked about. I
was surprised to see season 11, a couple of the guys from Frasier
were
like running the show.
Right, yeah.
And it doesn't...
Like Peter Casey and... Or David,
Peter Casey and David Lee. And which is interesting in a way, because the season 3 episode we're going to talk about, to me, had elements, Frasier-like elements to it.
Yes.
Where the later one doesn't at all.
Yes. So, I mean, there's a lot of talent that went in and out. Behind the scenes, a lot of changes. Even though the Lionel notwithstanding, the main cast, I think, remained relatively stable, including like a pretty deep roster of supporting characters. Mm-hmm. I think the Jeffersons stands out for having like a pretty big number of supporting characters that are prominent and kind of memorable. I guess we can get into that. Maybe we should just take episode by episode, or
the main characters we consider George, Wheezy, Tom Willis, Helen Willis, and Florence.
Yes. Florence, the live-in maid. The Willises, the upstairs neighbors. And I would throw Lionel and Jenny into that too, even though towards the later years, they, like you said, Lionel left and Jenny made sporadic appearances. Yeah, but especially in the early on, Lionel and Jenny are a big part of the show.
Yeah, and so Lionel's the Jefferson's son, Jenny's the Willis's daughter, and they get involved and get married and have a baby and get divorced. And then the supporting characters, Ralph the doorman.
Yes.
And Mr. Bentley, the neighbor, British neighbor, who unfortunately we didn't get to see. And are there any other ones?
Well, Mother Jefferson.
Oh, Mother Jefferson, of course.
And she's surprisingly... She's like a main cast member in a lot of those early years. And I think in some later years, like I remember, and this is one of the weird things about a show that goes on very long.
Right.
Like George buys a bar. Do you remember that? And like I think him and Willis like go in on it, and there's like there's a character that is a bartender, and like in like 2 or 3 seasons when they have this bar thing where they hang out a lot, or George hangs out a lot, like this Danny, this bartender, is a pretty big character.
Huh. I don't remember that, but but of course.
Yeah. Right.
He would want to expand his empire.
Yeah.
And I assume Lou, the hot dog vendor, comes back.
Oh, of course. He's left such an indelible mark on the house that George built.
Yeah.
As far as my favorite character, I think Bentley is a beloved character.
Yeah.
Just because he's British, I guess.
Yeah, he's just weird.
I mean, he's a little eccentric, but he's basically a decent guy.
I know he needs people to walk on his back.
Yeah, that was a big thing.
And he often doesn't wear pants.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the reasoning behind that.
Well, he's a loyal customer of George's dry cleaning
that's right.
place. Now, that's the thing is, so yeah, George is wealthy because he owns a chain of dry cleaners, and apparently he spends a lot of time at the store too.
Yeah,
because I've been watching episodes where he's like actually working the counter, and
yeah, he's a hustler.
Yeah, he's a hard worker, and
yeah,
oftentimes to a fault.
Yeah,
he's very involved in his businesses, conscious of them too.
Right. Yeah, and I like Ralph the Doorman.
Yeah.
It's a very limited role, but he does good work with what
Yeah, he's sort of a shady character sometimes. He is, he kind of like plays both sides.
Do you remember that actor appearing in, I could have this wrong, but there was a PSA about racial discrimination in housing?
No, I do not.
And
I'm going to make a note of this.
I'm pretty sure it's him. He's the discriminator.
No, I did not.
If it's not him, it's a guy who's a lot like him.
Okay, I'm going to...
And it's also somehow very similar to the character like that in Raisin in the Sun. That actor from 12 Angry Men played. The sort of mousy guy.
Oh, yeah. John Fiedler.
Yeah.
Yes.
The Winnie the Pooh guy. Mm-hmm. Or was he Winnie the Pooh?
Yeah, he was like Piglet.
Piglet, yeah. Yeah, that guy. Yeah.
Okay.
So similar to that. I could be wrong, but I
don't remember that, but I'm going to have to check that out. Yeah. I'm curious. So, yeah.
And it being strange. Why is that guy why is Ralph?
Right. Yeah. So Ralph the Doorman is an interesting character. He helps move some plots along, and he's kind of like, he'll do things for a buck, and I guess that comes through in this.
Yeah.
The kind of thing where he's like, I can't do this. I won't do it. I can't do it.
Right.
And he gets a bribe. Essentially, he gets extra money. He's like, I won't do it for anyone but you, Mr. Jefferson.
Yes.
Changes in a dime when he gets the money. But he's basically a decent guy.
Yeah, he's both out for a buck and obsequious.
Yes, obsequious is a good way to put it, yes.
And leaves his post alive.
Yeah, I mean...
He delivers things.
It's a pretty big high-rise they live in.
It is. And they must have multiple doormen.
I hope so.
Yeah.
He seems like definitely the head doorman at least, but...
Right.
Yeah, he's always coming up there with... And he's almost like a concierge at a hotel or something.
Yeah.
He's always like, bringing stuff and like doing errands and, yeah.
He's a fixer.
He is, yeah. Yeah. Which a good concierge should be.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I know you had some things to say about Mother Jefferson.
Well...
When you're ready.
Yeah, I guess I might as well just say now. I always disliked the Mother Jefferson character.
Yeah.
Never never could stand her. She's part of a proud tradition of battle axe mother-in-laws.
Yeah.
And I sort of like the idea of battle axe mother-in-laws because I like the jokes that the husbands make.
Right.
However, those are generally better in small doses, and I think it becomes unrealistic when they just become just so overbearingly negative.
Yes.
Like in this case, her gimmick is she loves George, and George can do no wrong, and Wheezy can do no right.
Yeah. And
it becomes pretty tiresome to me. However, I will admit that the actress is very good at what she's doing. Mm-hmm. She's nailing the role, and I'm watching more Jeffersons now in preparation for the podcast.
Yeah.
I gotta admit I appreciate the character more than I used to. And I've seen some episodes where she's surprisingly plays more of a babyface role than I ever remembered.
Right.
Like when push comes to shove, a lot of times she'll stick up for Wheezy and kind of do the right thing.
Yeah, like in the Lou Gossett one.
Yeah.
I have kind of the same issues you do, though.
Yeah.
And she's less of a battle axe and more of she's very passive aggressive.
Yes. That's very true.
Manipulative.
Yeah.
Often fakes being ill, and she's the Olivia Soprano of her.
Yes. Yes, she is.
Without quite the level of, I guess, ambition.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was confused, like the episode, the episode before the Lou Gossett one, she's not living with them. Mm-hmm. In the Lou Gossett one, she's living with them.
Yeah, that her status seems to be a little nebulous.
Yeah.
Clearly, she's not sometimes, but in that one, it seemed like she was, or at least she was.
Maybe she just has a permanent room.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Because maybe she's, maybe she just stays over there from time to time, and if she stays for dinner, she will stay, and George will take her back in the morning. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
But to me, it's a little unrealistic to have Wheezy just kind of have to sit there and take it. And she gets her comments in, but it becomes a little too much. And the fact that George doesn't ever stick up for is as clueless as George is, it just gets a little too much for me. However, she's kind of funny, but I'm surprised, like in the early episodes, how all over the place she is. Like, she's over there quite a lot. Mm-hmm. So, but growing up, I disliked that character immensely, and I just kind of wanted to turn the channel when she was on a lot of times.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, oh, no, not Mother Jefferson again.
Yeah.
But now I must admit I've softened a little bit on her.
Okay.
Generally, I prefer those characters more like on the Flintstones, Fred's mother-in-law,
Right.
Ralph Cramden's mother-in-law.
Occasional.
They were troublemakers, but yeah, they only showed up every now and then. And the rest of the time, they were an off-screen kind of deal.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, I'm also not a fan of the hectoring father-in-law character. It can be annoying too.
Right.
And an example I would give of that would be on Three's a Crowd. Mr. Bradford, when Jack married Vicky, and Robert Mandan was all up in Jack's grill all the time.
Uh-huh.
I got annoyed at that character. I thought he never gave Jack a fair shake.
Right. Jack's a chef. He knows how to operate a grill.
Yes.
That's
But he also expects to have some personal space around his grill.
yes.
Doesn't need outside influences looming over his grill.
That's right.
So, Mother Jefferson, mixed results. I
Yeah.
kind of wish there was a little bit less of her. But I will say the actress does a stellar job at what she's given.
Right. Being annoying.
Yeah.
And Isabel Sanford is as Wheezy is a very sympathetic actress. So I think seeing someone constantly kind of mistreating her is difficult.
She isn't, I was always kind of intimidated by Isabel Sanford as a kid. I think kind of part of the fact is, and I mean, she was significantly older than Sherman Hemsley.
Uh-huh.
And especially in the later years, I don't know. It just, the age difference kind of, but she had a certain stature. And that's another thing, kind of almost going in a different direction, not just her being sympathetic, but she seemed to have too much going on. I mean, I just didn't like her suffering fools unless it was her husband. She took enough of that from George to have her
Right.
getting it from both of them just seemed unrealistic.
Yeah.
Because she is kind of a lot of times the voice of reason and, a pretty assertive person.
And yet she's also quite often just trying to keep up with what's going on.
Yes.
Especially in this episode.
Case of Black and
Case
White.
of Black and White.
Yes.
She's really having to keep on her toes.
Yeah.
Because things get out of control pretty quickly.
We get a classic sitcom farce kind of situation in this.
Right. With a foundation of race relations.
Yes, and I enjoyed this, actually.
I did too.
I think of the two episodes we watched, the second one was a little bit more silly, but not necessarily grounded in anything, whereas this one, it got into farce, but I found myself buying into what was going on a little bit more.
Yeah.
For stuff we'll get into. But should we talk about Case of Black and White?
Should, yeah.
The season 3 episode from 1977, and the premise in this one, George, as always, is driven by business, and he's got a hot business deal that he wants to close, and he actually is pretty much on the closing it.
Yeah.
And complications arise because it's Lionel that comes into the shop.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing is it cracks me up that George conducts all this business actually in the dry cleaners location.
Right, yeah.
He's going to get a lot of business from this guy through his what is the business the other guy has?
It's a restaurant.
So
tablecloths and things.
right. So all kinds of stuff to clean. So George is happy about that, and it's going to be presumably a long-term big deal.
Yeah.
And so Lionel comes in, and clearly there's some friction between the two of them, and it becomes apparent because George actually says Lionel's a good kid, but he's got a problem, he's marrying the wrong person, but it's not because of anything wrong, it's because she's white.
Yeah.
And he actually, I guess he throws out the term zebra.
Yeah. Well, she's mixed, and she doesn't. I mean, she favors the black side.
Right.
But still, yeah, that's
right. Well, and yes, so George has a problem with the Willises to begin with.
Yes.
He thinks that, people should be with, quote unquote, their own kind.
right.
And he calls them, a zebra relationship
Yeah,
all the time.
and then Jenny and her brother zebras, and yeah.
Yeah, and in the Jeffersons universe, by the way,
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that, if you're mixed, that you're essentially, to George,
You're white.
yeah, to
Yeah.
George you're white, whereas to the rest of the world,
Yeah.
and even in that first episode with Jenny's brother shows,
Uh-huh.
the rest of the world you're black.
Yeah.
I mean, you might be able to pass for white, but you still feel like you're black. But to George, it doesn't matter. You're basically white.
Right. And so he makes these comments, and then the guy's wife comes in.
Yeah.
She's white.
Yes, played by Ruth Shandling on It's Gary Shandling's show.
Oh.
I guess some, 10, 15 years later.
She played his mom?
Yes.
Okay.
She was, Gary Shandling's mom on It's Gary Shandling's show.
Yeah.
It took me a minute to realize that who she was. This naturally embarrasses George, who has to backtrack and say, "Oh, that was just joking around," and
Yeah.
he tries to pass it off. And in fact, he actually used the opportunity because actually one of the things that Lionel had come in to talk about was having throwing a party for the Willises, an anniversary party. And now all of a sudden George has, I guess he doesn't really want to throw the party, but he kind of used this occasion and thinks, "Oh, okay, well,
we'll have a dinner
with,
dinner party."
Yes, and you can meet my best friends, the Willises.
Yeah. Right. Now, very quickly, even before that, George is bragging to this guy about how much money he's going to make. But the only person who's going to make money on this deal is George. Wouldn't that be off-putting?
You know what? I hadn't considered that. That's a very good point.
They're not going into business like opening a dry cleaners together.
Right. I mean, I guess
George is a vendor being paid.
Right. I mean, I guess you're right. It's a little unseemly, like, to act like he's, pardon the expression, taking him to the cleaners.
Yeah.
But I guess the way I interpret that is he's giving him a good discount so that he'll save money in the sense that, like, he's not going with another vendor. So
the volume will.
I still feel it was you make a good point, but it's still got to be, I hope, some kind of mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah.
Like the guy's getting something out of it too for his business.
I'll buy that.
Like some bulk discount.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still a little weird.
Yeah.
Like he's so happy about it. Like you're right. The other guy he's saving money, but he's not going to be getting revenue from his dry cleaning industry or establishment. Yeah, the idea is let George change his tunes, and he's actually like excited about inviting the Willises down, which is a surprise to everybody, including the Willises.
Right.
And including Louise, Wheezy.
Yeah.
But the good times don't last very long because the Willises quickly realize that the only reason they're being invited there is because George wants to show them off.
Yeah.
And, put on a sham.
Right.
Because they're mixed marriage and to kind of show them off, and they take offense at that.
Yeah.
And they kind of confront George with it, and he really doesn't deny it. In fact, he pretty much says that's what it is. You gotta give him credit. I mean, he doesn't exactly lead with that.
Right. He tries being nice and says he's turned over a new leaf.
Yes.
It doesn't last long.
No, it doesn't.
And they bail.
Yeah, they bail and say, forget it. And right before the time that all this is going to come together, where they're going to have dinner.
Yeah.
So as a result, Florence, the sassy maid,
right,
he literally pushes her into the bathroom, into the water closet because people are starting to
right. He's cooking up a plan.
Yes. Yeah. He figures it out, and he says, he's just kind of like, okay, just go with it and everything. So I can't remember the guy's name. I think was it the actor Mel, or is it Henry, or
I think it's the guy.
Yeah, the restaurateur.
They're the Howards.
Yes,
that's their last name.
I think it might have been Mel or something like that, or something. But so they arrive, and George has to have Wheezy give them the tour of the apartment because he's got to cook this thing up. Yeah. Which involves bribing Florence to play Mrs. Willis.
Right, Helen.
And originally his plan is, that to just have her make an excuse as to why they can't come there and say, like, she's got a bad headache or something.
Yeah.
But then he hits on it when Ralph comes to the door.
Right.
He almost tells him to get out of the way. He tells him leave because he's got other things to worry about. But then it hits him that, hey, he can play Mr. Willis. He can play Tom.
Right. So there's a lot of shutting of doors and opening of doors, and ends up shoving Florence in a closet too. And sending Louise. Louise still doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah, and I kind of enjoy she's kind of walking around in a daze.
Yes.
Because he hasn't had time to tell her this yet.
Right.
And the best he can say is I'll explain this later or whatever. But he's doing things and it's funny because he's so much energy trying to sustain this. And it's like, oh no. First he wants them to go in the bedroom, but then Florence is getting changed.
Right.
I guess getting changed back there, so we're just going to take him to the bedroom. Like, no, the bedroom is private, The
balcony.
Yeah.
And it's freezing out
Come
on
out
the
on the terrace and see the view. George, it's cold out there. No, this is when you can really enjoy it. And he's doing things with his arms and kind of like he's embracing the air and everything, the night air and everything. And the Howards are just kind of bemused by it, but it's a little weird. But it's very funny him running around trying to sustain this.
It is, yeah. And then once Florence starts playing this role of Helen, she's being both haughty, and yet her grammar is worse.
Yeah, she's mispronouncing words but emphasizing them as if she's like her upper class thing. And to be fair, George did tell her to just hold your nose up. When she says, "Well, how can I be Helen?" He's like, "Oh, just put your nose up in the air and." He says something else act like you don't like anything or something like that. Basically telling her to be a snob.
Yeah. And clearly she's enjoying it.
Yeah, she is, and I think she's
because she's waiting for it to fall apart.
Yeah. I think that's part of it, yeah. She's kind of winking the whole time while she's doing it. And then when Ralph comes in, he's just kind of going along, but he's
not
very difficult
quite as skilled at improvising.
No, it's not.
Ask him what he's in, and he's like, doorman.
Yeah, and George is like,
Doorman Publishing.
Always joking.
Yeah. And what kind of... Ask him what books he publishes.
Yeah.
The ones people read.
Yeah. Yeah, and they ask him for some titles. Oh, yeah, well, our books have titles. So people can can find them. And and the funniest thing about that, it's a very stock sitcom situation. But to me, it's like it's George trying to like tie everything together and cover for them.
Yeah.
That cracks me up. Like they do the classic thing where they ask how long they've been married, and they say like 25 and 18 at the same time.
Right.
Like, well, how long is it? 25 or 18? And then they switch and 18, 25. And, oh, well, they're both right. You see, they got married 25 years ago, and then they had a second marriage 18 years ago.
Right.
So, George is the one, he's like nonstop throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
And his poor wife is just, kind of trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
But clearly he's up to something. And Lionel actually comes in like in the middle of this.
Right, and George slams the door in his face.
Pushes him upstairs to go up to the Willises. So. Yeah. Like, hey, why is Florence... Again, like classic sitcom situations.
Yeah. And then to tighten the screws, the Willises show back up.
Yeah.
And they're very bright. They suss out the whole thing.
Yeah, they figure it out like right away, pretty much what's going on.
And so they pretend to be Florence and Ralph.
Yeah. Yeah, which I thought was pretty.
It was good. Yeah.
You got to give respect to the Willises. They're smart.
Yeah, I mean Tom is not always smart, but
yeah, it's funny because that Tom has different levels of buffoonery based on what the script calls for in a given episode. But overall, I mean, he's in publishing.
Right.
He might not be. I guess the thing is, the stereotype is George is street smart and Willis has no street smarts.
Yeah.
So he's very dumb about things like, like things that George might be smart about and like real world kind of things. But Willis is pretty intelligent when he needs to be.
But they use it to their advantage along with Wheezy, to pressure George into giving them this party.
Right.
That they wanted.
The anniversary
and like
party.
a really...
Like off-site.
Yes.
Like running a play, like a hall and...
Yeah, a band.
Hall. Yeah, exactly.
So
they kind of blackmail him into that, yeah.
It's interesting because George ends up getting what he wants.
Yeah.
He does get the business that he wants.
Right.
And yet he still gets his comeuppance.
He does, yeah. Yeah, and even... They also like mix in some standard marriage jokes in there too. Like even like the Howards like have a few jokes about that, And I guess we're not really talking about it, but just kind of like the interracial aspect. I mean, they do kind of touch on the fact that it's not easy, and that other people have made comments and things like that. And
well, and in both cases, both couples have been married a long time, which on its face is not a big deal, except for that you think about like the Willises have been married 20-something years.
Yeah.
But it's 1977.
Right.
So they got married in the 50s, and they have 2 adult kids. And it must have been a huge deal when they got married.
Yeah.
And we know from another episode that at least their fathers are not okay with this at all.
Correct.
On either side.
Correct, yeah.
So I found that interesting. Like that's one of the most maybe progressive aspects of the show.
Yeah.
That they had this couple right from the start, and that they addressed this.
Yeah, and the Willises are... I think there's a couple of episodes where they have their issues, of course, but it's more like old Tom, but they're a very affectionate couple.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, in stark contrast to, George and Wheezy, they have a pretty mature relationship.
Yeah.
To their credit.
Right.
So not only is it a interracial relationship on primetime TV, which is rare, but it's a functioning, healthy, affectionate interracial relationship. It's probably better than a lot of the regular relationships. Well, I shouldn't say regular. The non-mixed. I mean, ones that weren't like a gimmick. Like the interracial relationship aspect was meant to be a gimmick, but like the lead relationships in many shows weren't as good as the Willises.
Yeah, and the Howards seemed very happy too.
Yeah, they did. I mean, and whenever this comes up on the Jeffersons, they were making it clear that while it may be difficult, that the George is a buffoon for having such a radical or just a vehement stance against interracial marriage, just as a thing.
Yeah.
The show makes that clear.
Yeah.
And also, I guess in this one, I mean, George will make white jokes about Willis a lot.
Right.
And that's kind of that's a lot of it. But a lot of the show is more. And it kind of comes out in this episode too. It's like George's snobbishness. It's more class than anything else. I think it's not necessarily bigotry. It seems to me like the bigotry is like stuff he jokes about and stuff he just thinks that because he can't count on white people and he's going to be let down by them.
Right.
And he doesn't think like his son should count on white people either. Whereas the class stuff seems to be like that's purely George.
Yeah.
I mean, he came from like humble origins and he doesn't want to go back there, and so he's this big snob, and to me that defines him even more than the bigotry does.
And he's nouveau riche, and also he's just a little bit of a misanthrope. I mean, he just doesn't like anyone.
Yeah, that's true.
He thinks he's. I mean, that's snobbery too. That he thinks he's smarter and better than anyone.
Yeah,
and it doesn't matter. I mean, even his wife, he's kind of that way too. But in general, he doesn't like people. It seems.
Yeah, that's why it really stands out when he's like nice or
Yeah.
Even every now and then he'll make like I was watching an episode where he makes like just a couple of nice comments about Bentley. I'm like, oh, that's nice. He's giving him his props. He's just like, oh, that Bentley's a good guy. He's weird, but
Right. Well, I did read an article from the 70s about the show, and Sherman Hemsley talked about George. He said he's afraid that's what's behind all of his behavior, and I don't remember him saying exactly what he's afraid of, but that makes sense. He's putting on this show to mask his fear,
right,
and to hopefully prevent the things he's afraid. I'm sure losing his money and
right. He wants to be accepted and
yeah,
but he doesn't want to be. Yeah, it's like the status that makes sense. It's not fear. It's not a desire. Like, he doesn't have interest in, like, going to the opera or something like that.
Right.
Or necessarily being accepted. Like, he would want to be accepted in, like, a country club or something just to have that status, not because he actually wants to hang out with those people.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense of it, that it's fear driving him, like, fear of going back to where he came from.
Yeah. And then, them being wealthy is obviously the other sort of just, here it is, a progressive idea.
Yeah, yeah.
Here are some wealthy black people.
Right.
They can make it, too.
Yeah.
And of course they did it through hard work, and I guess All in the Family, he got some money from a lawsuit or something. And
yeah, he was in like a car accident or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, Wheezy was the Bunker's maid.
Really?
Or no, I'm sorry.
Neighbor.
I'm sorry. She was a maid.
She was a maid.
She was a maid, not the Bunker's maid. That
right.
was yeah.
I can't imagine the Bunkers having a maid.
Yeah, no, I think she was for a while.
Really?
Or they were friends. Her and Edith were friends.
And Edith were friends, and they were neighbors.
But, right. Okay. Yeah.
And it was just more Archie, like there goes the neighborhood kind of thing.
Right. But it's weird though, because if you think about it, like by the end of I'm pretty sure that Wheezy started out like as a domestic engineer, but by the end of the show, I mean, it just seems odd to think of her in that role.
Right.
Just because you're used to her being sort of the head of the household, really, and with Florence living there.
Right. Yeah.
But like in the early episode, like, she's self-conscious about having a maid,
right.
and George is the one that wants to have them have a maid.
Because of, status.
You're right.
Yeah, and the whole Florence thing is interesting, too, because certainly by the later seasons, she's just a person living in their house.
Yeah, yeah, right.
I mean, she's basically a friend.
Yeah.
Except for to George.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he has, I mean, all these people by then are part of his life. He still insults them all the time.
Yeah.
I think he cares about them.
Right.
And some...
It's interesting, yeah, and a lot of times she's just coming on and doing like put down insults and stuff. And,
right.
But I do like I watched one episode where it ended with them just like going back and forth doing insults like everybody, but they're like kind of laughing. And sometimes when they have those exchanges, you can kind of see that George sort of appreciates the fact that she comes back at him, and I think he kind of enjoys it sometimes.
Yeah.
He sort of appreciates the give and take, and
sure, and he probably gets into just doing the back and forth.
Yeah,
but I like her. I like Marla Gibbs.
Yeah,
I like that. But if you're gonna have a character like George, you need someone around like that.
Right, and it's smart to do that because Wheezy does it sometimes, but she puts him down a different way. Whereas that's different than having somebody just come out, and it would be kind of a depressing marriage if they were doing that all the time. But you have Florence come in and just say it, and
Wheezy more makes asides, than anything. And he's not.
Like, a lot of the times...
He doesn't insult her a lot.
He doesn't. But, like, a lot of the stuff Wheezy says goes right over George's head.
Yeah.
Like, she says stuff that, like, we know what she means, but George is just oblivious to it, whereas Florence is telling him to his face, that he's short and ugly and stuff like that.
Well, that's another thing I was going to say, too, earlier, is a certain amount of comedy and misunderstanding on the show comes from him, in particular, not listening to anyone.
Yeah.
Because he's this, constant ball of energy.
Right.
Like he just comes in and starts talking and doesn't take in anything.
Yeah. Much to his detriment.
Yeah. And then in this episode, that happened to just a lot of the farcical stuff. Like, because he's moving so quickly, like Florence is trying to keep up with what's going on. And keeps, like, being loud and stuff when he doesn't want her to be, but she doesn't know that because she doesn't know what's going on.
Right. Instead of taking the time to find a way to get Florence and Ralph together and like explain it for like 1 minute,
right?
Which granted, in a sitcom, you don't have a lot of time to do that, but realistically, he should have done that and while they were out in the terrace or something.
Yeah, if you were directing a play, you just would have taken two people off the streets and shoved them on stage.
Yeah,
act
right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess we should go to this other episode.
Let's get to the second episode, which, like I said, premiered in 1981.
Yeah.
Called The House That George Built. And in this one, I called this, I think, like the George Jefferson Museum episode. And I kind of forgot how they got there.
Right.
But that's something that stood out to me. This is one of the ones I think I mentioned that I actually remembered watching it when it was on originally.
Uh-huh.
Or maybe like in a rerun, but not like in a syndication, but just actually watching it on TV, just thinking like, oh, what a outrageous premise this is.
Yeah.
So in this one, George has a near-death experience. All that he's thinking about is, which is interesting because it's like it's not so much that he's thinking about leaving behind a wife and a son, and what'll happen to like all of his employees of his empire.
Right.
He's thinking about like if he died now, like nobody would remember him, and what would happen to his legacy. Yeah. Which is kind of an interesting, typical, but he's very downcast about this.
He is.
So he comes up with the now. I can't remember how he gets the idea. It's something.
First, he starts to write an autobiography.
Yes.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, and that's his idea, right? Because Willis is in publishing, and I guess that inspires him. Like he assumes that he doesn't say it right away, but he assumes that Willis will publish his book.
Right. Yeah. And we hear a little bit of it, and he's ending every chapter on cliffhangers.
Yeah, like
that's just like then I met Wheezy.
Right. Yeah.
Or he changes her name to Bubbles or something.
Yeah.
There are all these
right
things that like she's not happy with it at all.
Right. He's making like his career's like a short order cook in the Navy sound like try to sound all dramatic.
Yeah, that's right. That's one of
this like florid description of peeling potatoes or something.
Yes, and the admiral once comes in and asks him to make his eggs sunny side up instead of scrambled.
Yeah.
And that's like the cliffhanger.
Yeah. Right.
But he's written 300 pages or something ridiculous.
Tore him off pretty quickly. I don't know exactly how long it took, but it's pretty quick by the impression I get.
Right, and then Tom comes down, and he's, of course, being very George about it. Maybe I'll let you publish my book.
Yeah.
And Tom came down to give Wheezy a brochure from this Egyptian exhibit.
Right.
And the idea of, Pharaoh being mummified and all that.
Yeah.
That gives him this idea, which is I'll let you say.
Well, he decides to create the George Jefferson Museum to honor his legacy. But the thing that I didn't like about this episode was the premise was too much for me because this manages to be a total surprise to everybody until like the night of the grand opening.
Right.
So in order to unveil this, he gets the Willises and Wheezy out and like takes them to this place.
And Florence.
Yeah, that's right. And Florence, yes, thank you. And takes them out for a night out and has them dress up and everything. And it turns out it's kind of like, at first I thought it was like a soft opening of the museum, but I guess it's also supposed to be like a real opening.
I think so.
And he unveils everything's under like sheets and everything and like
curtains,
like behind curtains, yes. And it's actually a paid museum.
Right. It's only $1, which is
true. That's
pretty reasonable.
Good. Especially in New York, I'm sure that's good.
Yeah.
Not like in D.C. where we're spoiled by having everything free. So many museums are free.
Yeah. Actually, everything is free in D.C. People don't know that, but...
Oh, really?
The food, anything.
Oh, okay.
You just go in the city and it's all free.
Oh, I should head into the city more often.
Yeah, it's just there for the taking.
I'm looking at things in a whole new way. Yeah. I need to visit our nation's capital more.
Yeah, all those people complaining about D.C. all the time. Yeah. It's all free.
Don't know how good they have it. You're
all paying for it.
Yeah.
No, unfortunately. But the museums are. $1, although it's a very small museum.
It is. Now, I guess you could make the argument that he rented or bought some kind of building.
Right.
It's not a big building, but he's got some kind of physical space.
I'm going to say he rented it.
Okay.
It's probably like similar to his dry cleaning places.
Yeah.
To me, it looked like it's in the first floor of some high rise.
Okay, yeah. And I guess it wouldn't have taken that much work to build up the exhibits like things like giant like baby pictures of him, like pictures of him when he was young, and
like now I don't think it would at all. I mean, maybe money, but I don't think it would take a lot of time.
It's like a pop-up museum. It could be.
Yeah, like printing giant pictures. You just go to Kinko's.
Right.
Or whatever.
However, some other aspects of the museum are a little bit more elaborate.
Yeah. So even before they go in, he reveals the first part. He like pushes a button, and there's a fanfare, and we see a giant picture of him, and it says the name of the museum, and then another sign drops down and says open 24 hours.
Yeah. Right.
And pretty innovative there.
True.
For a museum.
Yeah.
And then there's a little turnstile, and they go in, and there's...
Apparently it's like a self-admission museum.
I guess, or George is going to work there 24 hours.
Yes. Seemed like
unclear.
You just put money in the box, and then the turnstile is triggered by that. I guess.
But he lets them in free.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's good of him.
Family. And then the floor has a giant drawing of George on it.
Yeah.
And then we start to see what's behind these other curtains.
Yeah.
And they're giving a chronological walk through George's life.
Yeah, the idea is like there's a narrative
to
this museum.
So And the first one has the giant baby picture. I think some corn stalks, some sort of plant stalks.
Yeah.
And he came from a sharecropping family.
Right.
There's a teddy bear, a wash tub, a hand painted in sort of kid lettering sign that says the early years with like at least one of the letters backwards.
Yeah, like a little Rascals writing or something.
Yeah. Curtain 2 has the lean years, and that includes a picture of an adult George and like a pot with a Navy logo on it, boxing gloves, some work boots. There's some sort of sink or something. I don't know if that's in like an early, because the first one had like a wash tub and a washboard. So I feel like there's a cleaning
like
theme.
a clean theme.
So that might be some sort of early washing machine type thing.
Yeah, I think that was the intent.
And then curtain 3 is the filthy rich years.
Yeah.
It has another picture, money bags, gold bars, a trophy, bowling trophy maybe? Doesn't he bowl? Some sort of trophy.
Yeah.
A big industrial washing machine, which really, maybe dry cleaners have those, but whatever. And my favorite was the top hat with dollar bills stuffed in the band.
Yeah. To really give you a sense of what George Jefferson is like.
Yeah, and nothing says rich, like a top hat with dollar bills stuck.
Yes. Interesting bit of iconography.
And there are little speakers by each of them. And George says they should push a button. Tom, who's very excited by all of this, mentions that it's interactive, which is, this is very ahead of its time.
That's true. That is.
And he pushes a button, and a British voice starts telling you that British, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That you've spent the best dollar of your lives and all this other stuff. It's Peter Lawford.
Yeah.
And it is Peter Lawford.
Yes. Cost him a pretty penny, but it was worth it, George says.
Yeah.
Because somebody, I guess Wheezy says, is that Peter Lawford?
And I wondered that too.
That's got to be one of the most random appearances ever.
Yeah.
On anything. Just Peter Lawford as a voice on the Jeffersons.
Right. But we're not done. There are a couple other things. One you see and then they come back to, but is the Make Your Own Stain exhibit.
Yeah, George is particularly proud of that one, isn't he?
Yeah. Now, I don't know if that shirt revolves and there's another shirt, or it's a way to drum up dry cleaning.
It could be.
He bills himself.
Yeah.
The museum bills him. I don't know.
So there's ingredients there, and you can make your own stain and challenge George. Try to come up with something that can't be cleaned.
Yeah. But also behind a curtain again is a snack bar.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it also had some gift shops.
Yeah, there's like some merch there.
Yeah. And where you can have, as Peter Lawford tells us, Jefferdogs, the hot dog of kings.
Yeah.
And then this vendor, Lou, is just standing there.
Right.
And he's got an I Heart and then a Face of George Jefferson t-shirt.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool shirt.
And that is a pretty cool shirt.
I think also available in the gift shop, I believe.
I'm sure, yeah. And, of course, Tom buys 4 hot dogs for himself.
Yeah.
Because he's fat.
Yeah, that's what that was like a running joke. He was never that big, really. But,
No.
But, that was like a thing throughout the whole show.
Right. Was it this episode or the Reggie one where he said, "Guess what I have in my pocket"? It was the Reggie one because he used the tickets to the game, and Reggie Jackson one, and George is like, a candy bar and 2 bags of M&Ms. Guess what else I have in my pocket?
Yeah.
And he has these terrible tickets because they're near the hot dog vendor.
Yeah.
Clearly, Tom's taste in food is not upper class.
No.
He's not a snob.
That's fair to say, yes.
Yeah. So that's a museum, and it is ridiculous, but I enjoyed how ridiculous the museum was.
It is. I mean, just the visual of it is very funny.
Yeah. And you spend like half the show, or almost half the show, walking through it.
Yeah. The reveals are very funny. And although now disappointing for George is that he's not getting any foot traffic.
No, and the next time we come back, it's been 10 days.
Yeah.
And he's still in his tuxedo.
Yeah.
I assume he's been going home, but
right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And some Japanese tourists come in.
Yeah, very stereotype.
Yeah, and then they realize they're not at the Natural History Museum.
Yes.
They leave, and he has to give them their money back.
Yeah, which is a particular insult for George.
Now Lou is there.
Yeah.
But that's it. And George is down, and Wheezy comes in. He lets her in for free again.
Yeah.
And they have a heart-to-heart.
Yeah, they have a nice moment where George pretty much realized, he went a little too far, and
yeah,
he realized it was misguided.
Right. Yeah.
Now he realizes.
And now, yeah.
Yeah. It's a nice little moment there. I mean, she's gentle enough with him, but kind of like I think she makes a comment or two about how she pretty much knew this was absurd.
Yeah, but they're rich, so they can.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
And she never seems to be worried when he's spending money.
No, she's not.
Yeah.
She doesn't object to that. She doesn't say something. George, do you know how much this cost us, this whole fiasco?
Right. It's more just, here we go again.
And he's usually pretty cost sensitive himself, but I guess in this case it was the greater good, preserving his legacy.
Right. And she's sort of like, it doesn't matter if everyone knows who you are. The people you love know who you are.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. He seems okay with that.
Yeah, and just the fact that some people will remember him.
Yeah.
And he's like, what, millions? And, well, maybe not millions, thousands?
And then they're affectionate and they leave.
Yeah.
And I knew it was going to happen, but I just had to wait for the execution of it, because they leave. I'm like, isn't Lou still back there?
Yeah.
And he's behind the curtain, too.
Yeah.
And then you hear with the credits starting to come up, boss?
Yeah.
Boss?
Right. I guess I think my thing with this is, if it was anybody but Sherman Hemsley and George Jefferson, I probably would not like the episode. It'd be exposed more as, okay, this is just the kind of idea that looks good on paper, but it doesn't necessarily come together, and it's just so unbelievable. It's starting to get a little too broad.
Yeah.
But you're right. George is funny the way George is so proud of it, and he's. Again, when George does this stuff, he's so sincere to it, and the character is so committed. And in the moment, he believes it so much that it's easier to kind of just sit back and enjoy it. But
yeah,
I did like the other episode much more.
Yeah, I think the other one's stronger.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to bring up, since you talked about them being affectionate, one thing that I've noticed is they definitely have a chemistry together, but I don't see a lot of physical chemistry between George and Wheezy. Like, whenever they have to kiss or something, it's just kind of weird looking.
Like in that Lou Gossett episode.
Yeah.
They're kissing at the end, and it's super weird.
Yes.
It's just like a bunch of like pecks or something.
Right. They really don't seem like. Yet sometimes they have indications that there's some kind of passion between the two of them that keeps them going. And
right.
But to just see them together, it's more like, no, they're kind of like sparring partners and stuff. But you don't see a whole lot of romantic chemistry between those two, in my opinion.
And even that was weird, because they ended up turning it into a group hug with Mother Jefferson.
Yeah, that's right.
Because of course she was being all passive aggressive then.
Yes. Yeah. This is a season 2 episode where Louis Gossett Jr. shows up as George's old Navy buddy and keeps hitting on Wheezy. Like, yes. Not just hitting on her, but being really aggressive about. Yeah. Trying to get together with her, and that's a very good episode.
Yeah, everybody's good in that.
Yeah.
You see more of her, like, really, being a strong woman, like standing up for herself.
Yeah.
Against him, and Mother Jefferson makes it.
Yeah, I mean,
baby face turn. That's what you called it.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, say one thing about Isabel Sanford, but she was not like a cartoon, or did not have like a lot of some of the stereotypes that you might see like in African American actresses of the time period and other things that we've seen. I don't think you'd really throw that accusation at her. I mean, that was a strong character that pretty much. I mean, sometimes she would do things that were kind of foolish. There's like one episode I saw but just more like in a sitcom way. I mean. Yeah. Overall, she was a pretty strong character.
And she won at least one Emmy, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that was a big deal.
Yeah. But really, to me, the show is all about George Jefferson. Yeah. And the theme song, which we haven't mentioned this, but the theme song sung by Willona.
And co-written.
Yes, from Good Times. And man, what a performance it is. Yeah. I mean, she is like really like every single line, she's doing it with gusto. I mean, it's just incredible. And one thing I want to mention too, I was talking about to a mutual friend of ours recently about this, and it was kind of like, oh yeah, this is a weird thing that I'm assuming was a part of original broadcast. Maybe there was a commercial break or something inserted, but one thing that always I thought was super weird watching the show is at the end they start out with the closing credits, and there's like a fade out a lot of times, and they come back with more closing credits. Yeah, like I always thought that little hitch was weird.
It's definitely weird,
and it's just like the scatting, like the soulful humming. Yeah. Over those end credits, and it's kind of going through both segments, and it's just like you get like the main credits first, and then you get like the rest of the credits afterwards. And there are other shows that did that, but like on the Jeffersons, it was particularly jarring how they did that, because I don't know, I just thought it was just very bizarre. Yeah. I mean, to me, it really affected me. I mean, clearly it didn't affect you as much as it did me.
No. I more remember that, like, when it first goes to the credits, there's, like, that shot of Central Park. Yeah. And I remember that.
Yeah, and it's, like, kind of a nice thing.
But then that goes away.
Yeah, you're like, oh, okay, this is a nice end credits. And then just totally shifts to, like, a different shot.
Right, a bunch of just...
And rolling credits.
Multiple shots of, like, New York.
Yeah.
More high-rises and things.
But it's another more fine vocalizing over the end credits.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, man, that's just...
Classic theme song.
Yes.
And, people remember that, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
And George, if they don't remember anything else. Yeah. I think they remember those things.
And how could you not? The way she sang the lyrics too,
Yeah.
because it's not just like beans don't burn on the grill. It's like a beans don't burn on the grill. You know, just like everything, like the syllables. It's just excellent. I think it's going to be another tough best theme song race this year in the baddies.
I think so.
I can tell you, it's going to be. It seems like I'm saying that every time we do the show, but man.
Yeah.
In this case, if nothing else, the Jeffersons will always be remembered for that theme song. But I think it should be remembered for a lot more because it's a quality show.
Yeah.
Especially those early years.
I'll share with you this memory, being at a neighbor's house, and we were little kids, and we'd watch the Jeffersons, walking around the room doing a George Jefferson walk, and accidentally like swinging my arm back and hitting him in the, where a boy doesn't want to be hit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
But even the idea of two or three kids walking in circles around a room like George Jefferson. Yeah.
It was worth it, it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
I wasn't the one that got hit, but
no.
It still sounds like it was worth it.
So
I would encourage people to maybe look at the Jeffersons' legacy.
I think it's one of those things where you think back and you're like, that was a dumb show. Why did I watch that? But
and parts of it were a little cartoonish and a little broad, for sure.
I think I was going to say earlier, it started out more classic Norman Lear, and then became more the pseudo Norman, like the Different Strokes kind of show.
Yeah.
Without, I'm sure the Jeffersons did very special episodes, but not.
Yeah, I think.
But I think more just a sitcom.
I think the show touched on issues of race, and like there's an episode I was talking to you about where George is all excited about going, to give a speech, and he thinks it's like to some like prestigious college group, but it turns out it's like a group in the ghetto. It's like at-risk youth in the ghetto, and all of a sudden he doesn't want to do it. Partly because he thinks it's beneath him, partly because he just doesn't want to go out to that part of the neighborhood or something, stuff like that. But it's more like his snobbishness. I mean, it seems like the show's first and foremost, it's not being preachy. It's about being funny,
right?
And that was the goal. So it does seem to fit more in. Like I think, other than the basic fact of George's character, you don't have a lot of those controversial moments. Although, if you go on YouTube and you see, like, if you look up Jeffersons and see with a lot of the clips, a lot of the clips are moments that people took of. I think because it's shocking now of George saying a certain word.
Yes.
That was used very often on the show in its early years.
I was surprised about that in that Lou Gossett episode.
Yeah.
He used it, and I was like,
that's right.
Wow, I didn't remember that.
And it's kind of thrown back and forth. I think one time Willis asked George, because George always calls him a honky. And Willis says, well, how would you like it if I called you, And,
yeah, that seems more memorable.
Yeah.
Than the Lou Gossett one. It's used in a sort of a casual way that it might be with two black people.
Right. I mean, that's one of the more controversial aspects of the show today.
Yes.
Other than that, I think we see, because it came down squarely on the side of allowing, or tolerating, however you want to say, interracial marriage. Right. That part doesn't seem as controversial now. Yeah. It's clear that we haven't solved race relations in this country 40 years later, but a lot of those aspects of the show seem a little bit less shocking, and plays more like a traditional sitcom that does rely on it, but it relies on racial aspects more for just kind of traditional sitcom humor, if that makes sense. And another thing about the Jeffersons, just wanted to mention, Marla Gibbs did get a very short-run sitcom, like 4 episodes, called Checking In, a spinoff.
Right, yeah.
And she left the show for a while, but quickly came back. So, unlike the Ropers, she was allowed to return when her spinoff flopped. Yeah,
I guess had already signed a deal for 227 and was planning to leave, but they got to do it a season early because the Jeffersons got unceremoniously canceled. Yeah, that's an interesting thing and it seems like Isabel Sanford, I think they were all kind of bitter about that. Yeah. But they didn't get a final episode. Right. Now, it seems like pretty crummy for a show that was on 11 years. However, at the time, it wasn't prerequisite to have a series finale. And like I said, the show went from like 19th in the rankings to 59th all of a sudden. So it really fell quickly that last year. Yeah. However, I will point out that another show that went off the air, I think the same year, about the same time, Alice, did get a final episode. I was reading like a original article, I think it was from the Los Angeles Times, about CBS's fall schedule, and they were pointing out how sudden it was, and how they made a point in mentioning that, the Jeffersons didn't get a send-off or anything, but it's going to be gone. Alice did bow out earlier with a final episode, so I thought it was interesting that they made a point of that, and Isabel Sanford years later was kind of talking about how it didn't get closure. Yeah. Although, years later, they did I totally forgot about this, they did a stage revival. Did you know this? In the 1990s. Oh.
And again, I was reading an article about this from Entertainment Weekly. We'll link to this in the show notes. But and it's funny because it was like in 1993 or so, and it was only like 8 or 9 years after the show went off the air. To me, like the idea of the Jeffersons in the 90s seems like kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that long, and I think they got pretty much everybody there, and they were talking about why do the show, and Isabel Sanford mentioned, well, we wanted to have closure, we never really got that, and they were kind of saying like, well, we need the money.
Yeah.
They were saying like they didn't get any money from the show, or they got money from the show, but they didn't get rich on the residuals.
Right.
And I think Sherman Hemsley was saying, and he had a successful
follow-up.
He had Amen.
Yeah.
And Marla Gibbs had 227, but the rest of them they kind of went back to like theatrical acting and.
Yeah. And those shows aired together, right, on NBC?
227 and Amen. Yeah, I believe they did. I think as I recall, they were on like Saturday nights, like back to back. I think Amen would fall something. I think either one of those would be eligible for our podcast. But Amen was a show. Again, it wasn't a great show, but I watched it because of Sherman Hemsley. I do remember watching it.
I do remember watching it, both of those at first, at least. And so those probably led into the Golden Girls.
That's quite possible, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, the Amen, 227, Golden Girls, Empty Nest, Beverly Hills Bunts block. Briefly.
Yeah. What a glorious time it was. So, the Jeffersons, quite a long run, and I'm enjoying it. The whole series is on DVD. As we record this, it's available on Starz. But I think it's non-exclusive to Starz. I think it's also been on TV One and, like I said, other networks. It shows up on many different cable networks as well, and MeTV has shown it as well. So it's not too hard to find the Jeffersons. If you're looking for it, it's out there.
Right, and with 11 seasons, take a long time to get through it all.
Yeah, I don't know if it might take me a while to get through it all. But.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be doing that anytime soon. Just knowing, at least for now, it's there.
Yeah. And there's certainly enough really strong episodes that it's worth revisiting.
I think so. Okay, now it's time to have our piece of the pie.
Yeah, let's get it. I'm hungry.
Yeah.
This episode brought to you by Jefferson Cleaners. This episode also brought to you by Jefferdogs. They get the Tom Willis seal of approval and the Helen Willis eye roll of disapproval. This episode also brought to you by the George Jefferson Museum, now with animatronic George and Wheezy puppets. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.